What's up, Steelers fans? Welcome back to Around the Burgh. I'm your host, Wolf, here with our Week 9 recap of the Steelers' 29-27 victory over the Chicago Bears in a very strange game. We have a lot to get into, so we're going to jump right into it. But first, I'll introduce my co-host, Shayne Kubas. Shayne, how you doing tonight?
I wish I felt better about getting a victory, and we'll get more into that part of it. But feeling all right overall. Definitely looking forward to talking about this and kind of breaking it down from less of a positive angle than I was hoping to. But
Yeah, so I think that the thing that you and I agreed on, just quickly discussing it pre-show, was that this was a very unsatisfying win. And it was
yeah,
frustrating. It was weird. It's another run where the Steelers, had flashes of dominance and then let it slip through their fingers.
that's one way to think about it. Yeah, it's just this team, and this is the problem, right? Is like we've talked about it on previous shows that there's a certain brand of football that we have to play if we want to win consistently. And the problem is sometimes you get games like this where it's like clearly they had moments where they were dominating up front, they were physical, they're giving Fields a bunch of issues as a rookie quarterback, and that's all well and good. But then when the offense all of a sudden just ceases to exist for well over a quarter, and you let Fields get into a rhythm, and he starts to hit these receivers down the field, all of a sudden you have a ball game that you shouldn't have been in to begin with, and the only reason you win, for the most part, and I think we'll both agree, is penalties that were questionable at the very best.
Right. Yeah. And we'll have a whole officiating
Yeah,
discussion, but
yeah,
there's just a few kind of general things I want to say. And I think that one thing that I want to note about this game is that it's tough to evaluate because, like we both said, is there were times where things were going well and there were times when things were going badly, and it can be boiled down to individual players doing that, coaches doing that, units doing that. So, it's hard to take anything away from this game long term because it's like, okay, well, one drive they were good and on this drive they were bad, so that makes it really tough to kind of analyze. But at the end of the day, it's hard to win in the NFL. Wins are wins, even when you're playing the Bears. And like you said, the refs are helping you, but there are a lot of problems with this team that we're going to get into. So we're going to go kind of quarter by quarter, just because it was weird. This game felt like it took forever, but it actually was over pretty quickly if I,
yeah.
kind of
It
timed it out
wasn't
right.
it wasn't a super long game by
Right,
any
because like
means.
Monday
No.
Night Football usually like starts a little late just because of the way
Yeah,
they do their broadcast. So it was like starts at like 8:25 and was over like by 11:25, even though it felt like it took 4 hours. But
yeah.
anyways, so first quarter, Steelers pretty much dominate it. They force Bears to punt quickly. They drive down. Najee Harris has the easiest touchdown run of his career, and then they get another stop, and then they go down the field, and or I think they have one more punt. Then they intercept Fields, get another touchdown, and so they're out to a 14-0 lead pretty quickly, pretty easily.
And we were actually talking before. We were like, maybe we'll be able to do the recap in the fourth quarter if things keep going this way, because we were like, we could just watch the game
Yeah,
finish up and just talk about it.
that was dumb to say. I shouldn't have
Yeah,
said that.
and we probably, I don't want to say we jinxed it, but I think that
Yeah, pretty much.
we're a little bit too optimistic after just one quarter for sure. So
Right. And we'll talk about some of the good things in the first quarter. So, in the first quarter, I thought Canada did a great job of calling plays. They ran a jet sweep to James Washington. There was one play, I think it was on the first touchdown drive, where it was third down and I want to say maybe 7. And I saw that they had Claypool isolated one-on-one at the top of the screen with a small corner. I'm like, Ben's going to throw there 100%. And that's exactly what he did, and Chase caught it. So I was like, all right, cool. This is going well. And then the other thing from the first quarter or around that time period was Cam Hayward's absolutely dumb, just stupid interception. Just ridiculous.
He does this every week. He does something, whether it's batting 4 passes down or whatever, causing havoc constantly, or something stupid like. I mean, that play for him to this is the type of player he is. Like, he just creates things for himself, right? Like that's not the type of play that ever happens. Like, you don't bat the ball down like that and then it go right back in your arms immediately and you just catch it. Like, but he creates stuff like that. Like, he gives himself the opportunity to make huge plays like that. And that's really the whole identity of this team, is like we have a few select guys who are clearly just different from other players, and we need them to constantly make plays for us. And when they don't, it doesn't work, and when they do, it does, and that's just kind of the story of everything.
Yeah, I mean, it honestly looked like if you're like reaching for something on a top shelf, like a
Right.
bowl, and you kind of pull it off, but it falls, and you have to like kind of bobble it
Yeah,
in
you
the
have to like
air for a
do
few
one of
seconds,
these.
then just grab it.
Yeah,
That's basically what it looked like him picking off that pass. But
exactly.
that was
Yeah.
pretty cool. Um, so then on the Steelers' second touchdown drive, they're in the red zone, like inside the 10. They're throwing a lot of passes, which I wasn't a huge fan of. A
Yeah.
lot of empty sets in this game. But Ben has a really great touchdown to Muth where I mean, this was about as vintage Ben as you get. Nobody's open initially, he kind of rolls to his left and fires a dart to Fryermuth kind of in the flat to the left side of the end zone, which was awesome.
Yeah, when I saw that play, I think I tweeted, let's effing go."
Yeah.
Something along that.
Yeah. I mean, I
Something along
used
those
every
lines.
character that Twitter allowed me to go Muth.
Exactly. Yeah, I saw. I mean, his emergence is exactly what I was hoping for this year. I remember when we were talking about, what should we expect from the rookies this year? What are we looking at with him? And we obviously had a lot of expectations for Harris because you don't draft a running back in the first
Yeah.
round and not use him a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But Freiermuth was the question mark of like, is he going to have a huge impact as a rookie? Are they going to ask a lot from him? And between Ebron just being not good and
Mm-hmm.
him showing up in big moments, like he's clearly Ben's favorite target, especially in these gotta have it plays.
Mm-hmm. I
And
think
yeah,
I saw a stat that was like I think he's been targeted on I think he's been targeted 16 times on third down. I
excuse
think he
me.
said 13 catches for 7 first downs.
Right.
So great efficiency there. And I saw a few other tweets that were interesting, kind of relative to what you were saying. Is one, I think a big reason why he's being used so much is those injuries. Is Ebron is out, and like say what you will about Ebron, like but Ben does like throwing to him,
Yeah.
especially kind of in those third down situations. And Juju's out, and those are two like of Ben's like most confident targets, especially on clutch downs. So,
Yeah, you gotta have
just
it 3rd and 5, 3rd and 8, whatever.
exactly,
He's going for
exactly.
those guys.
So to see him doing that is, really great to see. So now we'll move into the second quarter, which
Mhm.
was pretty boring,
Yeah, not
mostly a
much
punt
happened there.
fest. Matt Canada got really conservative, and this was a byline throughout pretty much the whole game, or through line, if you will, where if it got to second and long, he would just run the ball right up the middle.
Yeah, and I saw you tweet about it, and like the issue with I think Canada at this point, right? Like a lot of people have talked about it with the play calling and different things, and especially early in the season, there were some very questionable play calls, like on third
Hmm.
downs and
Hmm.
stuff like that. But for me, like I think he's trying almost too hard to take Ben out of the game for a while and not
Hmm.
allow him to make some more difficult plays on second down. Like it's almost like he wants to hope that his run game can get them into better third downs and then let Ben have the
Which,
football.
which to be fair, that had been working the last few games.
Yeah, whenever you get
So that's
chunk plays
fair.
on second
Yes.
down, like, but it's those when you get second and 13, second like
Hmm.
the longer second downs. I don't like the idea of running the ball just at the defense on those downs because your odds of getting 7-8 yards on any given play, even with the run game being a lot better lately, it's just not as good as giving Ben a chance to go pick up. You don't have to ask him to throw for 20 yards on those downs. Just have him
Yes.
get 7, 8, 9
Hmm.
yards, give them a reasonable third down, and then you're good to go from there.
Right. And I think that the part of the issue was that around the middle part of the second quarter was when the Bears defensive line really started to kind of find their rhythm because the first
Yeah,
few drives they were getting blown off the ball, no
yeah,
problem. But eventually, like Akeem Hicks and Eddie Goldman started really getting penetration. They were struggling. They were giving Kendrick Green all kinds of trouble.
yeah,
Um, so that really kind of stymied the Steelers' run game in the second quarter, and that continued throughout. We kind of saw a return to some issues of Steelers defenses past when Cole Kmet started getting some big catches in the second quarter, and that would
yeah.
continue on clutch downs. And he's a pretty good player who's kind of been underutilized, and they're still trotting Jimmy Graham out there in key situations.
Yeah.
And, it's just been a weird week in the NFL where Devonta Freeman and Le'Veon Bell are getting tons of carries. Jimmy Graham is getting red zone targets. And you're like, I don't know what year it is anymore.
It's been a really weird last couple weeks in the NFL in general. I mean, like
Mm. I mean, yeah,
I,
that's this whole Sunday was crazy
yeah, it's just
specifically.
so much stuff. I mean, obviously the Jaguars, we could talk like so many of these games are just like not what you would have ever expected.
Hmm.
And the fact that this game ended up the way it did was kind of fitting, I guess, especially considering the way that it played out at the end.
Hmm.
But seeing like with the way Fields was playing early on in the game, I just kind of felt like, and I think this is part of the reason why we were already talking about, oh, maybe we can just do the recap, tonight instead of having to wait. Is he was playing like a rookie you'd expect him to play against a Steelers defense.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah, I mean, there was
that's nothing against him, but it just is.
also,
Yeah.
and this is something that a lot of people have been saying is, a big part of that is some of the offensive play calling. And like, there was some good stuff. Like, I mean, I thought the Wildcat stuff was kind of gimmicky. And then basically, as soon as I tweeted that, they scored a touchdown with
Yeah.
it. So,
Mhm.
I get burned again. But there was one point where they booted Fields right into an unblocked TJ Watt, which I was just
that
like,
was
boy, that's not what you want to do.
yeah, when I saw that play, at first I'm like, I thought that maybe Watt, like, they were trying to chip him or something and they missed, and then I'm like, oh no, they just literally let him kill Fields, but pretty much. Like, I was like, what
Mhm.
in the world was the idea on that play?
We'll have a little tangent here. Did you see his comments about roughing the passer penalties today?
Yeah,
He
yeah,
wants to get them called like Big Ben gets them called, which means he never wants to get them called.
yeah, he doesn't want called then, yeah, I mean,
You got to ask for the Tom Brady or Peyton treatment or the
yeah,
Drew
you
Brees
have to.
treatment.
That's what you got. I mean,
I feel like Kirk Cousins gets a ton of those, like the ones that are always like the full
like,
body weight or like the
right.
landing on weird. I feel like it's always
I
Kirk
think they just
Cousins.
feel bad for Kirk because
That's
Kirk
true.
gets ripped on a lot, even though he's like not. He's never been as good as people want him to be, or as bad as people say he is. So he's kind of in
Hmm.
that weird like middle ground. So I feel like they just feel bad for him. But
Hmm.
in general, I saw a lot of comments about like, well, Fields shouldn't be expecting these penalties because he's a rookie. I'm like, I don't. A penalty
Yeah, I
is a
don't care about
penalty.
that.
Like if you get destroyed and you shouldn't have been getting destroyed, then you call the penalty. And if you weren't, then you don't. Like it's
Yeah,
not this isn't rocket science. Like I'm
yeah.
tired
Well,
of this idea of that.
like I said, we'll get into penalty talk later. But back
Yeah.
to kind of the game structure. So third quarter kind of a little boring as well. Fields is starting to kind of get comfortable. He's making some nice throws.
Hmm.
They're starting to get some scoring drives, but Steelers have the scoring drive of their own where they go down the field. Ben has a big throw to Washington that was a duck of a throw, and Washington bailed him out.
Yeah.
And then he hits Fryermuth with a contested catch over Kindle Vildor, which was like, yeah, you got to go at that matchup every
Yeah,
time.
I don't know what the Bears were thinking there. Like you could tell that Fryermuth, like his biggest impact this year, and probably continuing moving forward as well, is going to be that red zone target. Because right
Hmm.
now, like the guy that I would think would be the top red zone target with everyone hurt would be Claypool, but he
Well,
still
he's
hasn't
hurt
really.
too.
Yeah, he is now, but like he should be a guy
Yes.
that you think
Yeah.
he's getting more targets there, but he's not. So if you're not going to target him very much, the next best thing, or probably really the best option right now, would be Fryermuth. So
Yeah, I think if they want to use if they want to keep going with that, I would use Fragmuth as kind of that like vertical option where like you're going
mhm.
contested catches, whereas Claypool you want kind of as a rack option in the red zone where
Yeah,
like he can, if he gets his momentum going, like he can carry guys into the end zone.
that's
That's
true.
something
Yeah.
he's better at. But anyways, so yeah, third quarter relatively blasé. The Bears are starting to get some momentum with Fields playing well. I think they scored on most of their drives. Luck at one point, the Steelers get a they force a fumble on the kickoff, and it's recovered by Chris Boswell, fresh off the concussion protocol, which I'm sure
Yeah,
he was
which
thrilled about.
yeah,
But then the Steelers couldn't score off that,
nope.
so they punt, pin the Bears pretty deep. Bears punt. Ray McLeod fumbles the ball, and it's returned for touchdown. Now, I originally thought it wasn't a fumble. When they
Mhm.
did the review, I'm like, I think you could argue this both ways. The thing that I'm confused about, and I tweeted this out, nobody answered, is that I feel like there's a rule where you can't. There's like some fumbles you can return, and others you can't. I guess like the ones that are muffed, if they're just touched, you can't advance them. But if a guy has possession and then fumbles, you can return that one.
I believe that is the
Okay.
distinction on punts. Is like
Okay.
if they possess the football, it's now as if they're just a runner, right?
Okay.
It's the muffs are the one where it's like technically it was never possession; it was just touched by the
Right.
team, and therefore is a live
Gotcha.
football at that
Okay.
point.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
Okay. And then this is kind of flies in the face of the challenge and ruling that was made on in the third quarter, where Justin Fields throws a deep pass to Marquise Goodwin.
yeah,
The
hmm
ball kind of gets jostled around. Tomlin challenges, but they say it's a catch. And then I think you could argue that, well, if that's a catch and he has possession with that much moving around, then arguably McLeod had possession with the ball
yeah.
moving around. But anyways, I
It's
digress.
that play. I will admit, like when I saw it live, I'm like that looks a little bit iffy, but I would not challenge it because I just don't see them
Hmm.
overturning it. And then of
Yeah.
course Tomlin challenged him, like yeah, that should just not send it.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I think that, you can argue that, the special teams touchdown is fluky. That probably won't happen again. I don't think McLeod has had really that much trouble with muffs this season.
No, not this year. At
So
least.
that's a mistake and they get really burned for it. And you could say, well, they got a fumble in the other one and they couldn't capitalize. So, it kind of cuts both ways with that. But The fourth quarter is when things really start to go off the rails because
Yeah.
Ben kind of starts. Well, for a few drives, he's bad, and he almost had another pump fake fumble situation, which I might have just turned it off at that point.
He needs to stop. Like, I understand it's been such a big part of his game, but like he clearly just can't do it the same way. Like, so he needs to just stop doing it.
Right.
Like, seriously.
And then the climactic moment of the game, and again, we'll get into the details of this more, is Ben gets sacked on third down by Cassius Marsh, and the taunting penalty is called, and the Steelers get a first down, and again, that drive gives them new life, and they eventually convert that for a field goal. We'll get into that. We'll get into that later. But that's just what happened.
We'll save that. Yeah, we'll save that.
So then Fields comes back on the field after that field goal. He leads a great touchdown drive. Makes really nice throws. Finds Allen Robinson for a huge throw over Arthur Mollett, where I just don't. I think Minka was going to rob the middle of the field, and he let the slot fade down the sideline go, which I'm sure there's an assignment there, and he that's just them having a play call and finding a good matchup where you have Allen Robinson, who's a great receiver, on Arthur Mollett, who's a replacement level slot corner.
Yeah.
So props to them and props to Fields for making a great throw. And he missed, I think it was Mooney down the sideline, or just by like a foot.
Okay, well, not sure what happened to Mitch here, but I think he's. Oh,
I'm sorry. I meant to click over a tab, but I hit refresh for some reason.
So here he is. Okay.
There we go. Okay.
Okay, as you were.
Everything's good. But anyway, but when the Bears score, there is a minute and 46 seconds left, which I was like, okay, they have Boz, like this is fine.
Right.
So Ben has some nice throws in this drive. I'll give him that. They hit that slant to Deontay for another big gain that gets them field goal range. And they kick the field goal with about 20 some seconds left. Ben tries a read option where he is very close to the first down, but I'll give him credit for trying.
The Monday Night Crew is so cringy to begin with, but like when they talked about like he wears number 7, Ben's favorite quarterback was John. I'm like, yeah, listen, don't start talking about John Elway and Ben in the same way as far as those plays because we all know they're talking about the helicopter play. Like Ben is not getting if that happened to Ben, he would be 1 dead and 2 the ball would be in the other end zone because we got knocked out that far.
I almost wonder if he's even just too big to helicopter.
I don't. Yeah, if they tried to hit him like that, I think he would just fall to the ground like a rock and just stay where he was. So,
exactly.
But that play was so comical. I'm like, he can't possibly have the football right now, can he? And then I see him try to run. I'm like, Ben, stop.
Yeah,
don't do it.
But anyways, so then the Bears have the ball back with about 26 seconds left. They, get some decent throws. They try a 65-yard field goal, which I need to talk about this. How did everybody think it was a doink and it was 10 yards short? Because everybody on Twitter was like doink, 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 doink,
yeah,
doink.
It just
and then they showed the other angle, and it didn't even get to the end zone.
Something about that camera angle. Something about that camera angle made it look like that got hit in the upright.
Yeah,
and I'm like, because I was like,
I thought it hit the crossbar.
Got that close. Yeah, I was like, there's no way he got that close, did he?
Yeah, and I was like, I see the other angle. Oh no, Justin Tucker magic. It's like, oh, he doinked it off the front of the crossbar. But
something about that camera angle just made everybody like. I think even if I remember correctly, even the announcers were like, oh, doink.
Yeah, they thought it was a doink too.
And he wasn't even close. I'm like, what in the world happened?
That's just a wild optical illusion.
Yeah. I don't know.
Mandela effect. But Steelers get the win. Just a wild game, and we'll get into the officiating now because that's the biggest story. So
it's the biggest story.
I think the other thing about officiating I want to discuss is that the Bears had 12 penalties for 115 yards. The Steelers had 5 for 30, and I would say the majority of those Bears penalties were offsides, neutral zone infractions, and then a few like false starts and illegal formations earlier in the game. And when all those were happening, I was like, okay, this has to be the last straw for Matt Nagy, because if you can't, like, if there were like, I think 10 or maybe like 8 offsides penalties or neutral zone infractions, it was ridiculous. Like just
insane.
Just get your defense aligned properly. Like after like the third time, you're like, what are you doing? How is this still happening?
That was the weirdest thing for me, because like as many bad penalties as there were, and we'll talk about those for sure, there's so many penalties that were just the Bears just not being good at. Like they just were not able to play disciplined football. And like these are guys like Robert Quinn is a veteran. Like this guy's played for 10 years. He does not, there's no way he's gonna line up offsides 3 times in a game or whatever it ends up being. Something like it just felt off the entire game. Like something was wrong with the Bears. And in a very weird way, like not just being bad or anything. Like they were just out of sorts.
And like there was one where they had it. I can't remember exactly what it was. I think the play clock ran down. They were trying to get it set. Fields is trying to get
Yeah.
them set. Play clock runs down. They call timeout. They come out of the timeout, and they still get an illegal formation penalty. And it was weird because the way Correnti announced it was like they aligned in a legal formation, then shifted to an illegal formation, thus the penalty. And I was like, wait. And the way he says legal and illegal sound very similar.
Yeah.
I was like, wait, what did they do?
Yeah, so basically, like you said, I think what happened is that they started off at first in a legal formation, and then they shifted into that, and
Yeah.
then ran the play. And I'm like, that's still just an illegal formation. Like, why'd you say it like that?
Like
Like
there was
now,
like you
now
kind of just
everybody's like confused
yeah,
because
you
I'm
didn't
like,
need to explain that as much as you did.
did they
But
create a penalty? Like,
I I don't
it
know.
was weird. I don't know,
But
but
obviously the huge thing that everybody's talking about is the Cassius Marsh taunting penalty. And when he gets that sack, and obviously Cassius Marsh was on the Steelers at the end of last year, at the beginning of this year, was cut, has bounced around practice squad, and is now on the Bears. And he got activated the day of the game. So he sacks Ben. He does like a Cobra Kai kick,
mhm.
celebration past Ben, and then looks menacingly at the Steelers sideline, and then turns away, walks back, is kind of hip checked by Tony Correnti, who is in the process of pulling his flag. And I don't think
Mhm.
the hip check had anything to do with the
No, I
flag.
don't. I don't think
That
so.
was
Yeah,
just
no.
that was just perfectly coincidence, and that's like an old
Right.
man just being like, I have to get my thing out of my
Yeah.
pants.
Exactly. Yeah.
But Marsh goes back to the sideline thinking he's ended this drive, and then his coach like lays into him, and he's like, "Wait, what happened? I'm very confused." And then he finds out he got penalized, which was I tweeted this when that penalty was thrown. I think this is going to be the example that gets this rule kind of nixed going into
I
next year.
hope so.
Like we saw it with the pass interferences. I think we've seen it with other kind of rules being quote emphasized. Is there's like one moment where it's like, all right, that's it, done, goodbye. And I think this was it.
The problem with this rule, for one thing, is it was already a dumb rule, right?
Mm-hmm.
These are guys who are being paid millions of dollars, who are in one of the most competitive atmospheres you could possibly be in, and you're asking them to like. I understand keeping your cool, and like there's obviously excessiveness that is still always going to be called, whether it's different things like if you get in somebody's face and stuff like that, that's going to be called for 15 yards all the time. You do not have to have this penalty specifically for if they do something that's a little too much in the eyes of the referee. There's no way to govern that fairly every week.
Mm-hmm.
There's just no way to do it. Like you've seen some of these guys get penalized for the dumbest crap, and that was one of them. Like I understand. He stared at the sideline. He made it very clear what he was trying
He's
to
just
do.
standing there menacingly.
Exactly. But it didn't mean anything. He
No,
didn't say anything to anybody. He was
no.
just
I
like,
think
"You cut me." It's like we
I,
get it. We know what he was
yeah,
doing.
I
Like it's not
think
a big deal.
Correnti said in like there was like a pool report going around where he said he looked at the sideline too long. I'm like, are we seriously changing the
It's
outcome of games
right.
for that?
That's what I'm saying. You can't do that. This is why you're probably right that this is going to be one of the ones they look at in the offseason and go, yeah, maybe we didn't do this for any good reason.
Now, I say that, and the interesting aspect of this is that Tomlin in his press conference today, and Tomlin is a member of the competition committee that put this emphasis into place. Now, I still think it was at the direction of some of the owners, namely the Maras, who made a big stink
Yes,
about this in the preseason.
because
And
they have
being
no
that
fun.
exactly because their team is terrible and they don't understand that this is an entertainment business.
Right.
But Tomlin, member of the NFL competition committee, says he is a fan of taunting flags. Says, quote, "We're just trying to clean our game up," end quote, and quote, "We understand that people playing it at a lower level watch us and often mimic us in how we conduct ourselves," end quote. Now, I imagine that he's saying that other franchises are mimicking the Steelers. Is that how you took that to be? Or is it
I
something else?
I honestly took it as like the college and high school ranks
Okay, all right.
watching the
That
NFL.
makes more sense.
That's what I took it as whenever
Yeah.
because I remember him talking about that and like I understand that to a certain extent, right? And I'm
Mhm.
not saying like guys should be allowed to just like get in the face of other players and like say stuff to them and like
I
that, but
think
that's a whole different thing.
I think that like the CD Lamb waving goodbye to a Patriots player, Antoine Winfield throwing the deuce right in Tyreek Hill's face. I'm fine with penalizing them, but guys are going to do those, and I'm fine with it because those are first of all, like that's players being like, okay, the game's over. Like I can do this now. Like you
Right.
do need to have certain awareness to be like, okay, I can do certain things in certain situations, and they're like, screw it. Like we won the game, I'll take the fine, whatever. But go ahead with your point.
But that's the thing, right? Is like those types of things, if they're gonna get in trouble for like throwing up peace sign or for just doing something like is if you're not impacting a player, if you're not doing something to a player, if you're not getting in their face, like if you're not being legitimately like belligerent, right?
Yeah.
I just don't care. Like
Yeah.
these are adults who are playing in a very, like I said, hyper competitive environment on an entertainment business.
Yes.
Don't get in your own way, right? Like, don't make the games mean less because you can have stuff like this happen where play games are literally decided basically on these types of penalties. Just it's not worth any sort of like cleaning up the game or whatever else you're talking about. It's not worth it if this is going to be the outcome of it.
No, I don't see how anything Marsh did was dirty or anything different than like a Steelers player has done. I heard an example of when the Steelers were playing the Chiefs a few years ago. William Gay made a big tackle and like stood with his arms crossed and he like looked at the Steelers sideline when he was on the Steelers and he
Hmm.
got called for unsportsmanlike conduct for looking
Right.
at his own sideline. So like this stuff has been happening
It's
for too long and it's all dumb. And you know, I try to like think of this because people are always like, oh, like if I did this in my job, like I'd get fired. And it's like, okay, you can't make that comparison
we need to
in good
stop
faith.
that. Period.
It is a bad faith argument because this is an entertainment business. That's the first thing. That is, and it is completely different. Like you're not being paid, you're being paid millions of dollars. It's like, yeah, to entertain people. And I totally get like don't be belligerent towards other people in the game. But you are there to the NFL like puts together these highlight montages of players doing their celebrations. They are huge fans. I'm not of the run down to the end zone after a turnover thing. I still think that's stupid. It annoys the heck out of me.
It just
But
wastes a bunch of
they
time.
champion this kind of stuff. And
Yeah.
I people not again, I don't think people necessarily some people are kind of like, you know, if you like moss a dude, like you have every right to do whatever you want with them. I'm like, yeah, sure, kind of.
Whatever.
But
Yeah.
in hypotheticals, but in reality, like if you are not doing anything demonstrably, you know, belligerent, like you said, or foul towards a player on the other team, you shouldn't be called for it. And unless the gesture you're doing to nobody is, you know, extremely violent or you know sexual and graphic in nature,
Yeah,
you
like
know,
Marshawn grabbing his,
yeah,
you know
like
what,
that,
all the
or
time,
like the
which
Hingle,
I think was funny, but
yeah, or
whatever.
like the Hingle McCringleberry sketch,
Yeah, exactly.
stuff, or you know, even I think even the throat slash is like okay, like I get why some people might
It's
be that, but
weird. Yeah.
it's just all so stupid, and you know, I really hope the NFL makes some change here. But in addition to this, there were other big penalties that were no calls and calls that helped the Steelers. I think in general the refs were very pro Steelers in this game. There
Hmm.
was a penalty on a low block on the red zone in the Bears.
That was
There's
the
a
one of all of them that I want to say real quick. When I watched it live, I was like, that like the block looked weird on Watt, but I didn't care about it. And then I watched the replay when they called the penalty. I'm like, I don't think he made contact with him. Or if he
yeah,
did, it was so little that Watt barely noticed that it happened. It was just didn't make any sense to
well,
me.
this was the one that they called on the Bear. Oh yeah,
Right,
never
the
mind,
low
never
block.
mind.
Yeah, the low
Right,
block. Yeah.
right, because there was one where the Steelers were on offense and they
Hmm.
didn't call it.
Right.
So that's interesting.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's clear, like, it is clear the Bears were extremely undisciplined. That doesn't excuse some of these calls. The other thing to keep in mind is that the Steelers were hosed multiple times last week against the Browns. So
Yeah.
it's a
So,
week by week thing, and I'm not excusing the things that happened this week. But, and I'm
yeah.
sure that if that taunting penalty had gone against the Steelers, I'd be absolutely livid right now. Um, and even if the Steelers had a good officiating week last week, but it's clear that like sometimes home teams are just going to get calls, and sometimes the refs are just going to be terrible. And I think that Tony Correnti does need to be suspended, removed. Like he's one of the older refs. If I'm kind of just saying that
Launch him
anecdotally,
into the sun.
yeah, and make the refs full time and make them available for media after
Yes.
games.
This is something that I think isn't talked about nearly enough. This is the professional football.
Hmm.
Okay. This is if you're gonna have refs, if you're gonna have guys whose literal job is to make sure the game goes the way it's supposed to and the rules are followed. Why are we messing around with this not being a full time job?
Hmm.
Realistically, I don't care if you have to pay them a ton more. I don't care if you have to give them all sorts of stuff that they don't have access to right now. Stop making this a talking point with your
Hmm.
game. If
Yeah.
if you do that, if you make them full time, if you give them more benefits, if you give them more training, all of that stuff, if you give them more incentive to have to be right as much as they can be, to be objectively correct as much as they can, like you said, the media availability, the game is going to improve. And it's a very easy way to make the game better, and it's a way that no one is going to be mad about. Like,
Alternatively, the NFL could maintain the status quo,
Right, as they will.
continue to pay a labor force at part-time, and use them as a distraction measure from the NFL engaging in other various shady business practices with their owners.
Yeah, so option 2 is going to be what happens, yeah.
I have my tinfoil hat here. I'm gonna pull
Right,
that out.
right.
That the NFL is using the referees and their terribleness as a scapegoat, false flag, distraction away from the NFL's other shady various dealings. Anyways, we'll get back to actual football analysis here. So, like I said earlier, this game is weird because there were some times where players had really good plays and sometimes where they had really bad ones. So we'll talk about the offensive line because I think that's the biggest story from a football standpoint, at least a schematic standpoint. And that it's just offensive line, like we've been saying, Freaks has been progressing very nicely. They had arguably their best game of the season last week. And then this game was probably their worst in some time.
Yeah, and it seemed like it was definitely very sporadic, right? There was
Mm-hmm.
sporadic moments of what we've been seeing lately, like
Mm-hmm.
that touchdown to Freiermuth in the red zone, whenever they gave him all sorts of time
Yeah, that was great.
to
Yeah,
find like
they did a great job highlighting that where they had like the blimp cam
yeah.
and they
Mhm.
showed like them picking up the stunt. And then we've ragged at him for a while, but like this was a great game for Chukes because I don't think they mentioned him once.
Yeah, I didn't have to
And I
worry
don't
about him at
and I
all
don't
this
think
game.
I think he gave up maybe like one pressure.
Something like that, something
Checking the
really minor.
blocking things. Nothing. Nope. Perfect.
Nope, yeah.
Perfect game from him, at least according to PFF.
Right. So it was very there's moments where, especially as a pass blocking unit, that they showed up and gave Ben plenty of time to make decisions down the field. And other times where, especially from that interior, that the interior is still my biggest concern because Dawson
Mhm.
hasn't been as good as I was hoping he'd be as a second year player. And
Yeah.
part of that's with a whole new offensive line, I'm sure isn't helping him.
He's between two
Um,
rookies, so that
right.
hurts.
It's tough. It is.
And
Like
like
I'm
he
sure that's hurting him.
again, like there were some plays where he was good, then he had a holding penalty, and some plays where he was just bad. Trey Turner had a great night run blocking, but he allowed Roquan Smith to go right by him on a pass blocker.
Him as a pass blocker still is my biggest concern because like
Right.
Ben getting interior pressure is just a nightmare at his
Yeah.
age and his
Yes.
build. Like it
Yeah.
just doesn't work.
Yeah. Really any pressure at this age is bad.
Yeah, but I mean, especially right
Yes.
up the
Yeah.
middle
Yeah. No,
because
you're right.
at least if it's off the edge, maybe he can just
Yeah. Step up.
skedaddle, hold
Yeah.
2 feet and run. That's what it looks. That's the best explanation I have for when he runs.
That's
He's
fair.
just skedaddling
That's
across the
fair.
field.
Um,
But yeah,
I saw, I love when people do this. The way like people talk about like the way Kyler Murray and Patrick Mahomes run. Somebody asked because like Matt Ryan had some scrambles, and somebody asked like, what does Matt Ryan run like? He looks like he's trying to like not make any noise.
some dudes,
And so
man, some quarterbacks.
that isn't Ben.
Oh.
I'll have to think about exactly what Ben's is. But anyways, but yeah, I'd say this was a really rough game for the two rookies. Dan Moore, we kind of praised him last week because he, limited the damages against Myles Garrett. This week, Robert Quinn has his moments, but Robert Quinn gave him a ton of trouble.
Yeah.
Kendrick Green was getting routinely worked on third and short situations by Eddie Goldman and Akeem Hicks.
Yeah,
And that's something that
awesome.
yeah. And that's kind of something that, was the issue with Green coming to the NFL, like just being a drive blocker in man schemes. But, that is kind of just the thing about rookies offensive line. He's like, you need to get them playing time. So they have to learn by doing,
Yeah. And I think that it just sucks that we're in a year where it's like, yeah, that's pretty much it with Ben, probably, he's got to make something happen. It's like, well, this is the best we got. So let's roll with it.
And then on defense, it's, they allowed a decent amount of points. But for a half, they were really good. They were. TJ Watt had another great game statistically. I would say that it's getting his sack numbers up are great. Catch up to Myles Garrett, even though he played 2.5 less games. But a lot of those sacks, I would say, should be at least credited to other players. And that I remember there was one where like Wormley, put an offensive lineman right into Fields' lap, and then Fields had to scramble, and he was like right into TJ. So
yeah, it was a lot of TJ. Like the thing with TJ that will happen is there's plenty of really quality sacks that he'll get, obviously, and quality tackles for loss and big plays.
Yeah,
but his effort,
yes,
brings up his statistical profile for sure. Like his actual, like it doesn't change anything about him as a player. It just means his statistics are sometimes a little bit more gaudy than they actually would be otherwise.
Right.
And there's nothing wrong with that by any means, but it is something where when you're watching film, like especially in this game, a lot of his actual sacks of I think only one of them was a true like win for me.
Yeah,
in
like
terms
he
of
just
beat somebody.
Yeah, because like the other one was the one where they booted Fields right into his face.
Yeah, and he just was like, "Oh,
yeah, he's like, all right,
Fields
cool,
is
I'll
in my
take
face.
it.
Cool, I'll just tackle him." Like,
yeah, exactly.
That was still the dumbest play of the
Yeah,
night.
that was
So
very stupid.
I don't know
but like Hayward was great, like you said. Highsmith had a very good game. I would say Schobert and Bush were mixed. Bush had, I think he kind of just had reread one play wrong, but then he had another one where he had a great pass breakup.
Yeah, on Robinson, yeah.
Yep. And then I would say that Hayden was good. We didn't really hear from him. He had a pass breakup on Jimmy Graham, which again, back to 2013 or whenever.
Yeah, I mean, really for both of them at this point.
Yeah. And then Minka, I thought was really good. Like he had that one great, chase down of Fields where he popped him into the sidelines, and everyone was like, "Oh, we need to protect Fields." Like, well, Fields dipped his shoulder first.
Yeah, I mean, he was a runner at that point.
Yeah,
like,
and he was very much a runner, so I don't want to hear it.
I don't care about that one.
Yeah.
No.
But I would say that Mollett, especially Edmonds and Sutton to a somewhat lesser degree, but still were pretty much on the struggle bus for most of the night.
Yeah, the thing that I didn't like I understand like Mollet's played pretty well for most of the year when he's gotten chances, but at this point, I'd much rather see Norwood or Pierre out there, especially on non-vertical routes. Like I know the fade was kind of a mix there, but
yeah.
The other problem too is like I understand why they're doing it, but Minka having so many different responsibilities in the secondary has really limited his playmaking opportunities. And I still think that's missing that in that defense right now.
And the funny thing is like they've even trimmed it down still. Like he's still like they are asking him to do a little less, and he is playing better. But so and I think that at this point, like I was like, oh come on, like let's get Minka an interception, please. But I think that Fields is just like, I'm just not throwing towards him. Like, I'm not going to be.
I mean,
stupid.
that's
I'm
the
not gonna
smartest
test
thing.
it.
Yeah, I mean, especially like it's still going to happen. Like, he's not going to get a ton more opportunities all of a sudden if he does slim down his role. But it does seem like other guys are missing assignments and or not able to complete their assignments, and Minka's trying to make up for that too often, and it creates situations with Mollett like we saw with the fade and other situations where like Mooney could have very easily scored on that play that he barely got missed by Fields. And like him and Mooney definitely seem like they're getting their act together between them too, and he's felt most comfortable throwing to him.
Mooney committed OPI on that touchdown near the end of the game for what it's worth, but you can't really complain about that.
At that point I wasn't going to say anything to anything with the Bears.
Yep.
So.
And then even on special teams, Harvin, I called it when he was going to he's going to shank it. I was like, he's going to shank it right here, and he did. And he wasn't great tonight. I think there was at least one more that was like not a great punt. The McLeod fumble, but otherwise, I think he had some good returns. Sometimes where I think he's pressing a little bit too much, so maybe they kind of say like, "Hey, just reel it in." Sometimes just take the fair catches and punts. It's not a big deal.
He just tries too hard sometimes. Right. Even with that fumble, like he could have just gone down and been done with it. He just wanted to make a play, and like I get that, but in a game that had been going the way that game had been going, and just so much weird stuff happening, I'm just trying to get the ball on the I'm just trying to leave with the play.
And then
I'm not
even Boz, he misses an extra point, but he's nailing multiple
50, I think 50 yarders.
I saw something that he's like 80% from beyond 50 in Heinz Field, which is I think that everybody else is like 30%.
I feel like there's not many kickers that are above 80% on field goals period in Heinz Field, let alone 50-yard field. I mean, dude is just disgusting. I mean, we've talked about it. Like, I think even it came out recently that the Steelers consider him like they talk about him and Tucker's 1A and 1B in the NFL all the time.
I think Hayward said that. Yeah,
and I'm like that exactly. That's the situation and it's the fact that it's both in the AFC North just kind of cracks me up a little bit. But
for sure. The other thing I want to talk about was that it's like just looking at this is like a very weird game from a box score and like team stat standpoint, in that like. The Bears outgained the Steelers 414 to 280, even though they both had 12 drives.
And the roughly Steelers the same time of possession, roughly.
No, so the Steelers actually only had 8 more plays, but the Steelers had 10 more minutes of time of possession.
I see 31 minutes and 29 minutes on mine. I'm not sure if I'm wrong about
that. The ESPN one for me is 34 and 5 seconds to 25 and 55 seconds.
Oh, that's weird. Okay, I'm not sure which one's right though.
Well, anyways, there we go. But like, Steelers didn't run the ball super well. They didn't pass the ball super well. But I think a big part of that was because the defense had multiple times where they got them really good field position.
Yeah. The yardage, especially the yardage numbers for sure.
So that kind of makes it weird. But the Steelers were great in terms of like conversions in important situations. Like they were 6 of 17 on third down. So a little above 30%. Or 33%, 2 for 2 on fourth down, and 3 for 3 in the red zone. And I believe that's touchdowns because I think all their field goals were super long. So,
yeah, it was really one of those games where like it was more of clutch plays than it was consistency.
Right.
Where like we saw like some questionable play calls, some lackluster running at times. Like Najee did his best most of the time, like he always does, but the yards per carry are going to look pretty bad.
Yeah,
But
they look
he
bad,
did
but
a good
I
job.
think
But
if you watch this game, you know it's the offensive line because they were
yeah,
getting
getting
into the back,
manhandled.
because for the last few weeks, like they kind of will meet him at the line of scrimmage and he can make a guy miss. They were getting into the backfield with
Yeah,
regularity,
that's what
and
we
that was
can't
the
allow.
issue.
Like we need to
Yeah,
give him at least a little bit of space
yeah.
past the line to give him a chance to actually break
And
something
he had
past
one
5
really
yards.
nice like Le'Veon run where he like stopped, jumped
Hmm.
over a hole, jumped back again, went up the field and got like a nice big gain. But
Yeah,
those are few and far between. But I think this is kind of like what happened last year. Is that it's tough to evaluate because the Steelers are winning games, and I would say they're playing well for the majority of them, maybe right around 50%. But and they're finding ways to win, and I think some people think that that's a bad thing, and some people might think it's a good thing because it kind of teaches your team to like obviously like, never give up. Like if games are close, like you got to keep trying, like you can win it. Alternatively, like your team might just not be that good because they're playing all these close games and they're like not being consistent performers throughout the whole game.
I think the question of like whether that ends up being good or bad is what kind of development do we get down the stretch from the rest
Hmm.
of the team? Like if the offensive line can move past this performance and continue their track towards getting better like they had
Hmm.
been, if Ben can just stop being so old for like
I don't think that's
another
gonna
like
happen.
listen, give me like 4 games the rest of the year at
I
some
mean, he
point where you don't
hasn't
look old.
to
But
his credit, he hasn't thrown an interception in like 5 weeks.
yeah,
And
yeah,
so, I think he's had a turnover because he had the fumble against the Seahawks, but he's not really turning the ball over. I'd say he's checking, he's not checking it down as bad as he was early on, but he's not, really trying to test the middle of the field, down the field as much. I
yeah.
think so. He's being smart about it for the most part. I think there's a few, brain fart plays, but I think that can happen to anybody. And it was happening to Ben even before his arm deteriorated. So, it is what it is.
Yeah, I mean, it at this point, like looking at this just from a statistical standpoint, so this year, right?
Hmm.
You're looking at 10 touchdowns, just under 2,000 yards in 8 games, so not great overall production. 6.6 yards per pass attempt, which is actually higher than it was last year by a little bit, which doesn't sound right, but I guess it makes sense because he's hit a couple bigger plays than normal. 10 touchdowns, only 4 interceptions so far. He's thrown plenty of passes, like especially the linebackers for some reason,
Yeah.
that probably could have been intercepted, but he hasn't been. And I will say he's been sacked 18 times,
Yeah.
which is on a pace for with 17 games about 40 times,
Hmm.
which is definitely would be the most he's been sacked since at least I think 2013.
Yeah.
I think it'd be the most.
Hmm.
Now again, this is an offensive line that isn't nearly as good as he's been used to, and also he's old as dirt,
Yeah.
so like that doesn't help. But overall, like I could have expected worse than this for sure coming into the season.
Hmm.
And I also could have expected worse than 5-3 at this point for sure.
Yeah.
It's just, is this going to be a situation where they're 5-3 and they can make it work down the stretch and continue to win like this, or are they going to have to adjust and get better at a lot of things to continue to win games at the rate they are?
Hmm. Yeah. So I'm looking at some of these like kind of more advanced stats and relative to last year. So,
Yeah,
because that's a pretty decent analog to Ben. So he's completing about 0.5% less of his passes.
yeah,
The drop rate is actually exactly the same, which is kind of concerning.
yeah.
Um,
Which
which I don't think they're not happening as frequently as I would think. So, his time to throw is a little up, so I would say that's good.
yeah.
Um, where was the other one? Oh, A dot. So his average depth of target is 7.1. Last year it was 7.6. So even that's gone down a little bit.
I think that skewed a little bit from the first couple weeks though too.
You're probably
Honestly,
right. Yeah, that's
yeah,
true. Let's see. I'm kind of looking at these other numbers. So right now his pressure to sack rate is 26.5%. So of the time he's pressured, how many times it turns into a sack? That would be his highest since 2013.
yep, makes sense.
And it's at right now it's almost triple what it was last year and
Yeah.
basically double what it was every year from 2016 through 2019.
And honestly, I'm not surprised, not only because I think part of that's obviously the offensive line, but also he's not able to escape as well as he has
Hmm.
ever in his career. I mean,
Yeah.
even last year, like it wasn't pretty at all, but he didn't have to do it much, and he was able to at times. You can just tell, like when he runs, it just feels like he isn't going anywhere.
So
Like it's just,
you say
yeah.
that, but he had 3 scrambles all of last year, and he's up to 2 already this
Well,
year.
listen, okay, his scrambles suck, so
No,
hopefully
no
he doesn't
argument
do it.
there. Okay.
Hopefully he stops doing it. But
All right, we'll get into
yeah,
our 3 stars now. We'll end on a positive note. So I think we have to. I'm going to start my 3 stars with Chris Boswell.
yeah.
Coming off concussion, he does miss an extra point. That's probably why he's not higher. But he hits field goals in 54 yards, 52 yards, and 40 yards, including the game winner, basically. And he also has that extra fumble recovery on the kickoff, which is, I think he was just surprised as all hell to see the ball bounce into his arms.
I mean, I don't know how you wouldn't be surprised. I mean, that, like I said, that was just a crazy
Hmm.
situation for him to end up like with that play. And honestly, I think that the fact that he was able to come back is the only reason that we won this football game,
Hmm.
realistically.
Yep.
Because if we had to kick those field goals to win with Josh Lambo, I'm sorry, he's not going to
Yeah,
make them
definitely not.
So definitely glad that he was able to come back in and actually make, impact in that from that perspective. I think for me, for my 3rd star, it's tough because like a lot of guys played well on defense for the most part, but there was some definitely leaky plays down the stretch. Like honestly, I'm tempted to give my 3rd star honestly to Highsmith, just because I
Okay,
still think he's
that's a good one.
playing like the stat sheet isn't going to be there with him all the time at this point,
Hmm.
because so much of it's going to be getting collective pressure, and just whoever
Yeah.
happens to get there is going to get there. But especially in the run game, a lot of the time this year too, like he's really impressed me
Hmm.
with the point of attack more than I would have expected him to be.
Yeah, he had some really nice run stuffs on Monday night. He got he got 4 total pressures. So yeah, and I think he's another one where like he's kind of forcing the quarterback into like guys like Cam and TJ kind of on the rebound basically. So yeah, definitely a good pick there. Do we have the same 2nd star? And if so, do you just want to rattle it off?
I think we might. It
Okay.
depends.
Do you have the doc up?
I don't
Okay.
actually.
All
I
right.
didn't
Well, so
pull
it's
it up.
Cam Hayward for me.
Right, that's what I thought.
Okay,
Yeah,
all right, cool. That's great.
that's what I
Cool,
was thinking.
perfect.
Okay.
So 2 solo tackles, 3 QB hits, 5 hurries, 1 interception. Obviously, no sacks this week, but tons of pressures.
Mhm.
Again, forcing him into guys like TJ and other people. Uh, he had to come off at one point. He looked hurt for a little bit, but then he was back on later in the drive.
Yeah,
Um,
he's good. Yeah, he's
yeah,
always good.
stalwart against the run as always. I think he was the Steelers' highest graded player according to PFF again.
Not
Um,
surprising.
yeah. So anything else on Cam?
Just a side note that first of all, I think my tweet about him was A plus.
Yes. Yeah.
But
John Clayton.
don't nobody show John Clayton that play. But that was just me having some fun. But I think realistically, this is a guy who somehow is getting better as he gets older, as a defensive lineman.
Hmm.
And don't know how that's working exactly, but I'm not going to question it. And I hope it continues for like 5 more years.
Yeah, for sure. All
So,
right. So our 1st star, and I feel like we might go repeat here again, but I have it as Pat Fryermuth.
yep, I was going to like as much
Okay.
as like the TJ stat line is good and everything. I was tempted to make him my 3rd just for the stat
Hmm.
line. He definitely had a really good game, but not anything that I would say is like transcendent compared to some of his other performances. But Pat, just for him getting involved as much as he has, is enough to give him the 1st star for me. I just want that to continue, and for him to play this well, to be the guy who scored 2 touchdowns for us, set the tone as a red zone threat. This needs to continue to happen if the passing game is going to get any better.
Yeah, absolutely. So just the stats for record: 6 targets, 5 catches, 43 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 2 first downs. And I think he was 2 of 2 on contested catch opportunities. So,
Yep.
and they used him in a ton of ways. They ran him on the little shovel option sweep, which he got a good run after catch opportunity there, which was cool. And I've been saying this for a while. Like he is an excellent blocker on the move. Like they're using him as like
Mhm.
the lead blocker on some of those jet sweeps, especially when they kind of leave that side of the field. They're undermanned over there. They're not running into blockers; they're running away from them, and they're kind of using him as the lead blocker for whoever gets the ball. And he's just murking dudes down by the sideline, which is great.
As a lot of people like to say, he was throwing dudes out of the club all the
Yeah,
time this year
yeah,
so far. Like
yeah. So
yeah, it's
yeah.
been
So
awesome.
I'm very happy to see that progression continue. Hopefully he keeps playing, so they don't have to put Kevin Rader on the field
Yeah,
again.
that play was such a because here's I have 2 problems with it. One, the play call, bad. Second, if Raider just turns up the field, not towards the guy that he ends up getting tackled by, he probably gets 5 yards in the 1st down.
Yeah, and the way you mitigate that is just by not putting a practice
Right,
squad player on the
don't
field.
put him on the field. Like Zach Gentry, he's been playing great.
Yeah,
Give him that play. He's at least
yeah.
tall as crap. Maybe he just falls forward and gets the 1st
Yeah,
down. Like whatever,
exactly. All right.
you know.
Yeah. Oh boy. All right. Well, we'll be back later this week with our preview of the Lions game. I think if Steelers I don't know. Now I'm not as worried about losing next week. I think if they had dominated this game, I'd be
I feel
more worried
better.
about losing next week. And like,
Oh
I
yeah,
mean,
honestly, you're right. Yeah, because that's even more of a trap game opportunity than that.
yeah, exactly.
I,
But
all I'm gonna say is if next week's game is half as stressful as this one was, I'm going to turn it off halfway
I'm
through.
sure they're gonna
I
find a
just
way
it's just like, come on. Ben's best the best Ben has looked all I know it was in the preseason, but the best he's looked all year was in the preseason against
against the
this
Lions
team.
backups.
Right. So I mean the Lions are basically backups anyway.
That's true.
So
That's a
like
good point.
just you need to let him go out there and rip the ball. I want to see it in the first half at least. If he sucks, then we'll just go to running the ball. But
Yeah,
I want to see him just rip the ball down the field like 10 times in the first half. I don't
yeah,
care. Like that'll be
absolutely.
fun at least to watch. So we'll see.
All right. All right. Well, that'll do it for us this episode. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Shane, let people know where they can find your work.
At Shayne Kubas on Twitter, like always, keep following at Steelers ATB. I keep saying that I want to tweet more from it. I just need to like stop saying that or do it because like obviously like I definitely am kind of busy this time of year, so hopefully later on in the season I'll be a little bit more active there. But definitely check out that, follow us there, make sure that you'll at least catch the streams and everything. And right now, not doing a whole lot of writing, so for right now, just don't really worry about that.
Love hearing that. You can
Yeah.
follow me at Mitchell T. Wolf, WOLFE on Twitter. Pretty much everything Shane said. I'm not going to repeat it because it's late right now. We're
Yeah.
recording late. I'm pretty tired, and
Yeah, it's
we don't want
time
to
to go to
waste.
sleep.
Yeah, we don't. It is bedtime for us. All right. Good night,
Yeah.
everybody. Thanks for tuning in.